Holy shit! Like, that makes it any better.
I'm not saying
name
it.
Name it. You got
better,
this.
but
Come on, jump in, please. I can't do that.
I want to welcome everybody. So we have two guests today. We got a Socrates TV and a Lemonese 666. So welcome for joining. That being said, we have our lovely panelists. So that's J Chow Live, Elysium, and Neymanen. Most of these people here stream. So if you are watching from anybody's stream, consider supporting them by just giving them a like or donate to Neymanen so he can make his ambitions of going IRL streaming a reality. So yeah. That being said, welcome everybody. Today's topic is about Palestine and Israel. So we kind of last week I thought it was maybe interesting for us to talk about it. I know that Lebanese, you have a background in the cultures of more Arab cultures and that kind of stuff. I know Elysium knows a lot about Israel and Palestine, so I thought this is a good opportunity basically to bring up that topic. That being said, I have three different topics that we are going to talk about. Maybe Elysium, you can just kick them off while I just give you the topic, and if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Okay, so the first topic is the Israel and Palestine conflict has been going on since the founding of Israel. The West, EU, and US has a good standing with Israel. Should the West engage or change their tone when it comes to the West Bank and the Golan Heights? So, Elysium, you can kick it off.
Yes, the
Sure.
chinchilla is Dutch.
So we do have a good relationship with Israel as the US. People have my biggest problem with the conversation in general is people have insane solutions. And not even getting into any state stuff, just of how the US should react to Israel. Because right now the US is staunchly defending and vetoing anything against Israel, and the idea that that policy is going to change overnight into condemning Israel is a huge thrashing flip-flop that just feels absurd. But no one is satisfied with the super small steps of maybe the United States needs to have a better dialogue with Israel, needs to bring these things up in a neutral tone or anything like that. Yeah, so I guess that's where my first thought is. Go.
Then next up, Lebanese.
Yeah, I think ultimately it is not a bad thing that countries are collaborating and trying to create partnerships. That's literally world politics and how the world is. Um, I think it's a good thing when Israel does things that cross over some previously agreed upon things, like don't take more land, basically don't overstep certain uh, you know borders or boundaries or whatever. And when they do that, I think it's a good thing for the world community, the US and the EU, for instance, to say, hey, not chill. um, but ultimately, I think it's a good thing to encourage more collaboration between every country, right?
Okay, and then next, Neymanen.
Sure. I do agree with Elysium's perspective that it's it is a long-standing ally. We're not going to nuke our relations with them over some war crimes and human rights abuses. But the reality is, if we want to be this force of liberal democracy in the world, we shouldn't be hypocrites about it, and we should be telling them that
masturbate and
when they do something wrong, that it's wrong,
breathing, and spitting my lungs out.
That dialogue should be there. It doesn't necessarily have to be thrashing of the relationship, but it should be. It has its place in the dialogue.
Okay, and then Socrates TV.
Sure. So I'm looking this up right now. It looks like the U.S. has vetoed at least 53 UN Security Council resolutions critical of Israel. So it's pretty common that the UN Security Council, all members vote for a resolution. That's something like, Israel has to get out of Golan or get out of the West Bank.
Yo,
do
thanks for
this
the
or
follow,
that, and
Bamna.
then the U.S. will just veto it because they're one of the 3 or 4 countries that can do that.
No, the panel doesn't hear
Um,
my alerts.
so there's a lot of steps from there to condemning Israel. Even just abstaining on those votes would fundamentally shift the way that the UN is able to actually decide on these resolutions. But over and above that, I mean, there's a lot of things that the U.S. has done and is continuing to do that are directly supporting what is the kind of worst things that Israel are doing. So Trump
Okay, I'll move
recognizing
Lemony's name.
Jerusalem as Israel's capital
I'm sorry.
is, I mean, I'm not even sure how to overstate how bad that is. There's a history that I've been reading up on that I think it was maybe the Camp David talks, the Oslo Accords, that basically fell apart because they couldn't decide what to do about Jerusalem. They couldn't agree. It's a very contentious territory. Both sides want to have control, and for a U.S. president to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital does a huge amount of harm. On top of that, there's the amount of military aid that the U.S. gives to Israel. I had this kind of pipe dream that maybe Biden, or maybe somebody braver than Biden, could start making that military aid contingent on something like no new settlements being built. And what that starts to do within Israel is it starts to align the security interests of the state with the more liberal elements of Israel. There's really only a minority of Israelis. I don't know if it's, like something like 10 to 20%, the religious right, who actually want to actively really, really care about building more settlements. And they've aligned themselves in the Knesset with the more conservative elements. So actually putting those elements opposed to each other for the benefit of the majority of Israelis is something I think really positive that the U.S. could do. Sorry, that was a very long opening.
No worries. Yeah, and then last but not least, our international relationship person, Jay Chow Live. Go ahead.
I wish I studied international relations. Maybe I wouldn't be single and a virgin. So when it comes to Israel, Palestine, and how the West should kind of interact with that, with Israel and its relationships, I am seldom to agree with most people here that, morally speaking, the United States and the West probably should be a bit more, apply a bit more pressure onto Israel for its wrongdoings, whether it be human rights violations, even extending to war crimes here and there. However, I'm also an adamant believer, and I'm going to reiterate this. I've done this quite a couple of times, is that when it comes to foreign policy, countries don't operate mainly on morality. And when it really comes down to it, what are the strategic interests of the West and the United States for applying that pressure onto Israel? There's not a lot, especially when not considering how the United States and the West are acting as countries, but what are the domestic influences that are occurring in those countries as well. Well, in the United States, I can't say the same about Europe, because I don't know. I'm unaware about it. But in the United States, there is a huge Israel lobby that is able to use the power of money, advertisements, soft power here and there in order to influence United States lawmaker decisions when it comes to any sort of military aid that goes to Israel, or any sort of stances that a congressperson may have going to Israel. So, like, even if there is magically a president that comes about that wants to apply a lot of pressure onto Israel. Well, Israel kind of figured out, hey, we don't need to bet on this. What we could do is influence the lawmakers, the Congress, because they're the ones that have the power of the purse. They're the ones that actually have, in some regards, a lot more control over what goes out of the United States and what gets applied onto other countries from the United States. And I want to say that they kind of saw that there was a potential for the culture in the United States to kind of change to be like, hey, we see it that it was no longer worth it to have Israel as an ally if we're gonna be doing shit like this. So they kind of jumped ahead and be like, okay, well, we gotta prevent this. And I think it's working for them. I don't see how realistically how the EU and the United States could divide themselves when it comes to Israel.
Okay, then the floor is open. Who wants to respond?
If I could just, if I could just quickly speak to that. So there's an Al Jazeera documentary called "The Lobby," and it explores exactly that, which is the influence of the Israel lobby in the U.S. and in the U.K. And in the U.K., there was this whole stink about like anti-Corbyn, like anti-Semitism smears, and this is like the kind of modern Israeli Mossad basically strategy to try to smear anybody who is at all critical of Israel as anti-Semitic.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Al Jazeera is a sussy source. Speaking from an Arab who's very familiar with Al Jazeera, they're not as reliable as a news source. They're not as unbiased. I mean, of course, all news sources are kind of biased, right? But Al Jazeera, in the Middle East at least, has a reputation of leaning more towards like conspiracy, like RT-ish. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't surprise me that they would post something like that.
Yeah, but what I know about like Corbyn, if we talk about Corbyn, I know the issue there, to be fair, was more that he didn't denounce the people that were in his party that were like openly anti-Semitist. So I think there is some issue there, to be fair. But
yeah, and what's interesting is this is actually not only in the UK. This has happened. Interestingly enough, it happened in Denmark as well. I live in Denmark, and in this, I want to say far left, but they're you would probably call them far left party here in Denmark. They had the same kind of, what do you call it, controversy, where there were people in their party that were anti-Israel, but where it got into like anti-Semitism territory. And it's exactly the same things. It's really interesting the relationship between this far left anti-Semitism in European countries.
Yeah, and what seems to muddle the discussions a lot, in my opinion, on kind of a meta level, like not only does we already addressed the fact like Israel will defend itself by saying that any anti-Zionism is basically anti-Semitism, but then on the other hand, you have like genuine anti-Semites constantly not gaslighting. Dog whistling, that's the term. Dog whistling, using anti-Zionism, but they're actually like full-on anti-Semites. It makes the discussion sometimes very, very hard to navigate, depending on who you're talking to.
And then in the U.S., you have the even stranger thing, which is the very, very anti-Semitic kind of Christian right, who's staunchly pro-Israel. So you have very pro-Zionist anti-Semites as well in the U.S. to round out the whole equation.
I don't know much about the European side, but for the American side, I know the like Israeli lobby wouldn't be nearly as powerful. It's probably not even the majority factor as much as that Israel itself has like popular support. So like I don't know that I care so much about like tracing the money memes as much as like the general prevailing public opinion is very pro-Israel, and I think that enables a lot of the United States' position.
Well, Elysium, I don't think that's the right framework to approach the Israel lobbying in the United States, because the lobbying is when we mention lobbying, we do often refer to, well, that like there's companies or individuals or whatnot, they're putting money into pockets of congressmen and they're bending politics for their favor. That's what we usually think about when it comes to lobbying. But for the Israeli lobby and for actually most lobbies out there, um, it's they also have a PR initiative in
Hmm.
getting public support. So a part of like bending the culture and the general public in order to be in favor of Israel is a part of the Israeli lobby. It's a part of their MO of, hey, we're going to be putting out some advertisements, we're going to be hosting these events, we're going to be funding these groups that are then going to proliferate our ideas and our message and what we want, our strategy of like calling everybody anti-Semite. That's all part of the Israeli lobby.
Yeah, so that would be the much bigger part that actually would matter to me about anything. And then if you're in a fight for public opinion, there's gonna be a bunch of different things that are playing into that. Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
I'm not interested in like what is more important than the other.
So yeah, so
I don't know why it's important for you.
yeah, so Chow made earlier in his opening statement, he made the point about like that there's no incentive to push Israel in the right direction
Mhm.
from the US or the EU. Would you guys agree with that, uh, or not?
No, that's something I wanted to bring up too. I think this was historically very true. Israel was like the one Western ally in the Middle East, but since like relations have normalized for the most part, and the threat of Middle Eastern violence is more centered on Iran than every Arab state versus Israel, um, the idea that unrest and violence in Israel is still like an acceptable cost or like a beneficial trade-off becomes less and less true.
No, I completely disagree. In like your understanding of what's going on in the Middle East, you still have Hezbollah in Lebanon that is still adamantly getting funded by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard,
Hmm.
and they are continuing to target Israel. And it's like the wars between Israel and Lebanon has occurred pretty recently, and
Mhm.
it's still continuing to this day. Hezbollah still exists. And you still have Iran that is staunchly against Israel, and you still have Iran trying to get a nuclear weapon, and Israel doesn't like that. You still have shit going on between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Like, yeah, it's totally
Not
different
between
from like
Saudi
back
Arabia and
then.
Israel anymore.
I
Yeah, it's
said
totally different.
Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Oh, sorry.
So
Yeah,
like
Saudi Arabia and Iran for sure.
like you describing it as like, hey, it's not like it was before where there was a coalition of Middle Eastern countries that went against Israel in the beginning, like when it came to at birth, that was the war. It's no longer kind of like that. Yes, you're correct in that there has been some efforts in normalization between, I believe, it was the UAE and Israel and some other country starts with a B, maybe I forget. Um, but like for the
Bahrain.
Bahrain, yeah,
Sorry.
And the
yeah, but
Saudis,
I was
yeah.
right. It started with a B. B.
Hmm.
Um, and then like
And Egypt.
yes, these are all true events. However, like Israel is still in a very precarious situation in which like its defense is definitely needed. It's not like we don't really have another reliable ally in the Middle East.
I think there's a huge difference between defenses are needed and in a precarious situation. I think the era of Israel's survivability being questionable is solidly over.
Wait, so like their survival or their like security? Because those two things
Both.
are different.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
because
So before it was like a fight for survival.
you could survive with
Sure.
one person left living, right?
Okay.
But that's
Yep.
not
Well,
ideal.
I think Israel's security is no longer under realistic threat.
By who?
So maybe I can step into to kind of square the circle a little bit and just so the question of Israel being invaded and annexed by other Arab countries. So like what happened in 1948 or 1967 or these kind of major large like army on army conflicts. that seems to be something that's kind of come to an end. Relations are pretty normalized with Egypt. But in terms of the way that Israel defines security, that really means not having attacks, whether they're mortar attacks or missile attacks or these kind of guerrilla forces. And that's where I would make the claim that all of these things that Israel does in the name of security, such as annexing more and more of the West Bank, is actually against its own security. Trying to I don't know if I want to throw out the G word, but trying to crush a population under your heel is not likely to make them want to just let you do that. And you will have support from other people who relate to that struggle. So when it comes to security, I would say that Israel will not be secure until it stops, until it starts, let's say, complying with UN resolutions and not building new territories, removing territories, giving back land that is illegally occupied. I would say that's when security will come.
Can I ask a question? Unless you guys wanna respond to that, but I have a question just regarding that a little bit. So why do we think? Because the Israeli government is obviously not stupid. If it's like part of their, if it's threatening their security interests, why do we think they continue to do these settlements?
Because they're able to do so without any really risk to their security. Okay, so they settle. What is the consequences of them settling? Like what? They have to deal with some people protesting. Okay, all right. Like the real security risk of Israel is not going to be coming from like them doing the settlements or like them doing any sort of human rights violations or whatnot. But it potentially could come from other countries. And like, yes, you know what? I could probably agree in that right now it's a pretty good time in the Middle East. There's not, I would say, like relatively in history, not a lot of conflict going on. However, that has nothing to say of what might happen in the future. Of what if Iran does get that nuclear weapon? What happens when they do start pointing it at Israel? What happens when they do start making these threats? What happens when like all these other countries start becoming maybe a bit more extreme? You know, things are, I would say, I'm pretty confident, are bound to change. And that is why even during peacetime, you don't see countries disbanding all their militaries because like, oh, we're at peace, you know? There's no threats to us, you know, we're chill. No, like they're still going to pursue these security interests. They're still going to want the United States to fund them. And you know, if that funding kind of just like blips, then all of a sudden Israel's vulnerable. All of a sudden they're bound to attacks. And you know what? Like it may sound really bad, but if that's the case, and if that's the consequence of the United States and the West not supporting Israel, then what does that look for us?
Sure. I mean, if I can quickly contribute an answer to that as well. So the Golan Heights and the kind of eastern part of the West Bank between them and Lebanon, these are important kind of geographically strategic areas. So the Golan Heights, I've been there. It's like a good vantage point to look out at any more kind of buffer zone you can have. Israel has a really strong air force, so just more land that some army has to cross to get to Tel Aviv or just any kind of like main cities. That gives them a lot more space to keep kind of bombing in those areas. So it does increase their security to control more land. Well, it increases their capacity to fight somebody who wants to fight them, but it also increases how many people dislike them, which I would say does not improve their security perspective.
Right, but I think it's obvious Israel is willing to accept reduced security in favor of or pushing their one-state Zionist project, and that's going to be the driving factor.
It's not even reduced security, as I said before. Like, what consequences are they actually going to get from doing these actions? Very little.
Well, long term, the idea
they're able to take it.
the idea is that long term, if they actually, sorry. Yep. If the idea that was proposed by Socrates was that if actually start long-term scaling down the the settlements, like really pushing for peace, that peace then is achievable, that they'll be able to, that Hamas, that Hezbollah will lose support, that there will no longer be this strong push in the Arab world to destroy Israel, or at least that it will be weakened. It will lose popular support.
No, that is such
was
a
the idea.
naive way of thinking of how these groups react.
Wait,
And
that would
I
absolutely
think-
be true. The problem is neither side.
No,
wants to be. It's
Elysium,
not that.
name was still
Right,
chatting.
yeah, I want to finish. I want to also, yeah, like I personally agree that it's perhaps a bit naive, but we have to believe that if goodwill is shown, there is a path to peace. Otherwise, it's just going to be permanent war. And that historically, that those things do happen. That there's a path to peace. The last thing I want to add is concerning Golan Heights. I think geographically, sure, it has a strategic value, but I think the most important value that it has is something I read was 15% of the water that flows into Israel originates from the Golan Heights. So that also is a huge strategic import. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't think
Elysium.
you guys realize. No, I don't think you guys realize that like
No?
the problem for a lot of these extremist groups towards Israel isn't that like Israel's doing bad stuff. It's that Israel exists. Just the mere fact that the name is on the map is a problem for them, and their solution is to get it off. Is to wipe it out.
But what I said wasn't that those groups are going to disappear.
Israel stopping the settlements isn't going to stop that.
Those groups have power because they have popular support, because people who are not like gung-ho extremist terrorists also support those groups. And those people are those who will be swayed by a peaceful
support.
Israel.
What?
Hezbollah absolutely has popular support.
Yeah, they do.
No.
Yes.
What?
Depends on what
Hezbollah
country
is a
you're
political
talking
party. Hezbollah
Yeah.
is a political party in Lebanon. That's where they're based at.
And
What
in
percentage?
occupied Palestine.
What percentage of the government is consisting of Hezbollah?
I don't, in
Okay,
Lebanon, probably not very big, but in
Very
occupied
little.
Palestine, a majority.
Hello. I want to let Lemonese in. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's a different question because, like, we're talking about popular support. The truth is, like, a lot of Shia Muslims in Lebanon, if not almost, I don't know. I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but a lot of people. There's a lot of popular support for Hezbollah. You could argue that it's due to other things. They were super popular after the Lebanese civil war.
Oh, what happened?
Ciao.
He's mad.
Oh,
Is he
Did he
mad?
rage quit?
No, I'm joking.
oh no.
Probably
That's
just an
I don't
internet
think so.
thing.
Oh. He got yeeted from existence. Should I just continue talking?
Yeah, just continue.
Okay. No. I mean, it's a okay. Here he comes.
Welcome back.
Poggers.
Good to be back.
Okay. Yeah, you could argue that their popularity is due to other stuff, not necessarily Israel-related sentiment or whatever. But I mean, Hezbollah in Lebanon amongst the Shia Muslims is extremely popular, regardless of how involved they are in government.
Yeah, it's like 80% very positive.
There you
Yeah,
go. I was gonna say 80.
That positivity is really gonna do a lot for Hezbollah.
Well, as an aside, though, like I don't saying government in Lebanon feels like an oxymoron. So I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Right now, I guess. Yeah, true. But then, like,
So
even if like popularity dips, in which like if this is not, I don't think realistically going to happen if Israel starts becoming a bit more nicer, because you still have like this dogmatic narrative based in history that like has a lot of grievances against Israel.
Chow, how do you square this with Israel normalizing its relationship with the rest of the Middle East? Yes, that exists, but
Exactly.
that can totally change.
Mm-hmm. So like Egypt in particular
because
is a great
Bahrain
example of
because
this.
Bahrain
Yes.
and the UAE are really important.
Yeah, well, no, Egypt. That's why we bring up Egypt.
Yeah.
The border who they fought,
Saudi
the
Arabia?
driver.
They're
Yeah, like the
not.
driver of the initial wars is now a peace
And like
with Israel.
it's like a memorandum of like recognition or something, right? That's
Oh,
the
okay,
whole
never mind.
the peace treaty that Trump was okay. It means like very little.
No, it's
Okay,
an
at the
economic-
end of the day,
What do you
Hezbollah
mean?
is still going to get arms and support from Iran.
True.
And at the end of the day, Hezbollah is still going to be antagonistic against Israel,
But
regardless
why?
if they
Because
have
it's
popular support or
occupied.
not.
No, okay. Anyway, I guess
So-
I feel like some of this
No,
is
no,
kind
no,
of
no,
useless
no, no,
because
no,
the
no, no,
bigger
no.
problem is that neither of these
The
sides
issue
want
is that,
peace.
like, okay, Israel is occupying Palestine. Okay, there are
Yeah.
two ways to think about it. Is the problem the new settlements, or is it the problem of like just Israel existing in the first place? You think it has something to do with the new settlements, in which that is a very, very small portion as to why people in that area don't like Israel.
Yeah,
They
I
just
would say
don't
the
like Israel,
occupation probably plays a
100%.
bit more of a role than just the settlements. I would agree.
Yeah, so like we went from 100% hate to like 99% hate because they stopped settlements. Okay,
Jay
awesome.
Chow.
It's like, yeah, you're missing the bigger picture here.
Would you mind if I step through some of these basic? Because I think
No, I
each
hate
one
it.
of these is total. Okay, I think each one of these is
I said no.
very.
You asked me and I said no.
No, he
Okay,
can do
well,
it. He can do
I'm
it.
just
Go
kidding.
ahead,
I'm
Socrates.
just metagaming.
So I think there's so first of all, there's just kind of like a basic concept that I really personally want to hammer hard, which is separating out when we talk about this word security into these two different things of like security of like the existence of the state of Israel and security in terms of like a day-to-day kind of feeling of safety from like mortar attacks and knife attacks and bus bombing, stuff like that. So the more of the kind of like the kind of personal security versus like state security. I would say that the state security is very strong, and I would say that the kind of personal security is very compromised whenever there's a perception that Israel is massively abusing human rights. And to connect these things can be very complicated, but I would say breaking these up is very important. But going back to the founding of Israel, and I've
Wait, hold
looked at.
on. Wait.
Oh,
You
okay.
just made a distinction, and then you
Mhm.
just left it there. Okay, are you leading
Oh,
up?
I
to it?
thought you
'Cause
didn't want to
it sounded
step
like you
through,
were
but if
running.
you want to step through, I would love that.
What is the point of this distinction?
So,
Besides that,
so
it's
the
important.
distinction is that different events and attitudes will be affected regarding these things differently. So, Egypt, for example, as a state which originally invaded Israel, is now like normalized relations, and they're not. There's no indication that they're going to try to invade. That they're going to send their army across the Sinai to try to invade and like destroy Israel. There's no indication that that's going to happen from them. I don't know actually when it comes to what groups that might carry out attacks, kind of like more terrorist style attacks within Israel that might be harbored within Egypt. I don't know about that. It's possible something like that occurs. But separating those two things out, I think, is actually critical for understanding these. I feel like these are things that are affected in very different ways. So Iran is supporting Hezbollah and Hamas, I believe, and they carry out both those kind of more like wars and more kind of like guerrilla terrorist attacks. And Iran doesn't like Israel. Maybe that's not something that's going to change no matter what Israel does to kind of like give back land, anything like that. So when it comes to those things, they might be pretty aligned. When it comes to support for terrorist acts in Israel from local populations in Gaza and West Bank, if Israel starts giving back land, stops building settlements in like a very like clear, decisive way, I would expect that support locally for terrorist actions will, if not evaporate, will decrease. I would say it probably wouldn't increase. But that's a different kind of security than Iran might keep as a country pushing to try to do things to undermine Israel. So did I do a good job of trying to justify whether that distinction is like useful?
Chichao?
Yeah, sure. I just don't think it's useful.
Okay. Well,
And like,
not sure how to
and
parse that.
the reason why,
Damn.
the reason why though, is that it's very hard to, I guess, like see the day to day and change the day to day when we rarely do know like what are going to be the consequences of like I guess short-term actions, the day tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. You know what I mean? So like that's kind of why
I don't.
I think when it
I
comes to
don't think I do.
security,
So
you have to see in the big picture. Okay, I think it's very difficult to like put responsibility onto a particular action when you're looking at it on the day to day. To put responsibility on a particular action because of a specific previous action. It's very hard to make that kind of a connection. And it's also very hard to see any sort of trends in that like perhaps that is just a once in a while kind of a thing. It's also you have to consider in that like there were times I'm confident to say that there are times in which Israel was really relaxed on settlements and maybe even a time in which they didn't have any settlements, and yet this still persists. So like
I think he's
I
expanding
want
it
to
beyond
say
just settlements. We're not trying to find one specific action, but like a more macro trend. So if settlements stopped, if rights were given to Palestinians, if occupation was found a solution for, and stuff like this, like all of these things would be taken together, not just like we do
the macro
one X
trend
thing and
is that
everything changes.
despite countries that you guys keep on mentioning are normalizing relations with Israel, in which I kind of just see that as complete BS. They just aren't interested in wanting to fight, so they might as well just okay, well, let's just say we normalize. Okay, get it out of the way. Despite these things occurring, in which you guys think is so important, Hezbollah still exists. Hezbollah is still getting stronger day after day.
What is
And
so
like
these are two different groups. If you
I
normalize
wanna-
your relationship with the
what
Saudis and the
groups?
Iranian people aren't your friends now, it's not like you didn't make a new friend. I'm sorry, it's just that was very absurd. I don't understand.
Wait, I don't
Yeah,
understand you.
obviously, like I think Hamas and Hezbollah are two different creatures because of the
Wait,
like.
I didn't mention Hamas.
I know
I
I'm
did,
talking about
so
it. I want to
I
talk.
think it's
Okay,
responding to
okay. Name.
Who are you
go ahead
responding
and-
to?
So
I think
I
it's
want to.
responding to
ahead
me because
and
I want to
then,
help move
Chao,
the
we can-
conversation. Okay. Like I agree with you, Chao, that like Iran perceives Israel seems to perceive Israel as an existential threat. They don't care about settlements. They don't care about Israel treating Palestinians better. They care about Israel existing. They have said that outright. At least the parties that are in power. However, I think with Hamas, there has been historically at times, not with Hamas, but with Palestine, there have been times where Israel and Palestine were much closer to peace. Now, the issue there, and where I agree with you, where it's easy to perceive it as naive, is that peace and dialogue, it takes both sides. Just Israel de-escalating is never going to be enough to fix the situation. The de-escalation needs to be recognized and respected by the other side, and the other side needs to also de-escalate. And I don't know how that can happen either. To like
Okay, can we loop back? I feel like a bunch of this is like super weird because we're talking about like a situation where either side is trying to de-escalate or either side wants peace, when that just doesn't feel like reality. Like both
Yes,
of these
and
sides.
it's also not reality that like, oh, Israel should do this because then all of a sudden it's going to become a bit more secure. No, that's not the case.
So, okay, let me see if I can. So you gave me kind of a difficult task, which is you said it's difficult to draw correlation from like the policies of one country and events that occur later. That it is difficult. It is always difficult. Yet I believe that there are some things that we can draw some at least maybe soft conclusions. So the poverty rate in Gaza is estimated like 50 to 80%. They don't really have like consistent power or water. Buildings are constantly being demolished, and they're blockaded, so they can't get building materials. Would you grant that a population that is in a state like this is more likely to carry out terrorist acts than one that does have food and water and kind of the basic functioning of society, of jobs? I don't know if that's something that you think seems reasonable.
Yeah, I
Okay.
probably should give Naaman a bit more credit for his point that like Hamas, from what I've been seeing on the headlines, Hamas seems like they act in response to certain actions committed by Israel. And then there's kind of like maybe a cause and effect going on between the two over there. So Hamas may be a bit more responsive and maybe a bit more going along with your dynamic of, hey, if Israel just like acted better, then maybe they wouldn't get like all this shit from Hamas. Now the problem is that any shit that Israel does get from Hamas gets blown by the Iron Dome. And so then to Israel, and I think this they've kind of made this decision in that, hey, we are simultaneously going to pursue our one state solution for us and not for other people. Continuing this, we're going to mitigate the consequences to the point where they just don't exist. It's like, okay, sure, some rockets land in our cities and some people die, get injured. Okay, now let's use that into our propaganda, and like get us more support, and like here's this. So it's like it's really difficult for me to see how there's any sort of incentive for Israel to pursue them not continuing their settlements. It's like I don't like it. I want to make that abundantly clear. But like when it comes to thinking about like, hey, there's this country, they have goals, we want to change that. Well, how can you actually change their behavior if you're not even willing to accept that, like, hey, these are their goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think I honestly agree with pretty much everything that you said. If we pull it back though to say the U.S., where we're not beholden to, I mean, there are those kind of like radical Christian groups in the U.S. that want Israel to like take over the Middle East so that there'll be like doomsday and then like the Messiah will come. Other than that element in the U.S., that's not our goal for the region in particular. We don't specifically care about like settlements in particular or anything like that in the U.S. Is there a reason? Okay, there are reasons that we support Israel, but I think that there are a lot of moves that we could make in other countries in Europe and in the U.S. to push against this. And because the U.S. in particular, we do spend, I don't know what it is at this point, $5 billion a year, $20 billion a year in terms of security aid. I would say that we have some leverage, and given the fact that we're close allies, I guess, depending on how you look at our relations at a given time, you know, we have this connection to Israel. I think that we could put some pressure to do the right thing.
Okay. Then I want to bring it back to what Elysium and Name said. Elysium said in his opening statement that we should more approach this more neutral in a sense. And then Name was more about like pushing Israel in the right direction. So Elysium, what's this whole thing about like having more of like a neutral way of engaging?
I mean, it's like dialogue of how do you push Israel in the right direction. People think that we should be like condemning Israel and cutting off all aid and things like this, and it's just like an insane departure of what we currently have. Like if we have to propose realistic situations where, and like Socrates mentioned this, maybe the idea of America abstaining on more UN votes and letting the international community apply pressure on Israel is something that can show them that they don't have the leeway to do all the things they want and things like that.
Okay, Name?
I don't know if the UN stuff matters that much. I mean, I've seen like a UN Human Rights Council report saying that like arguing that Israel is an apartheid state, and the responses to that pretty much were like UNHRC is anti-Semitic. So like I don't know I don't know how much the like UN resolutions even matter in the grand scheme of things. I do think that like what I was thinking of was not like pressuring hard, because I think we do have to be realistic about the importance that Israel has in like Western influence in the Middle East, etc., etc. But like US diplomats, I think, absolutely can when they have their discussions with the Israeli diplomats, be like, hey, this looks bad. Like we gotta do things better. Of course you have your security concerns. You have to defend yourself against attacks, etc. But there are better ways of doing this. We need you to keep the crazy Zionist shit under control, and then it will be much more politically palatable. That's kind of what I was arguing for.
Okay, fair enough. Then Socrates also brought up one other point about the Jerusalem. You want to respond? Really?
Yeah, I don't think a state
Okay.
being classified as an apartheid country or it gets super awkward when you add occupation into it for the national level and stuff. But I don't think that has zero repercussions. I think we can look at how did the UN react to South Africa, and how if the UN is as a body going to start pushing for things like embargoes of certain goods and defense and military equipment to an apartheid country as a general principle that the United Nations upholds, and America is moving away from being a veto blocker, that represents a real concern to Israel, that's not instigated by America, but it's not being protected by America. And I think that's more of a
Elysium, you do realize that the United Nations doesn't really make a decision as a body, it's an independent thing.
I don't know what that means.
Okay. So the United Nations is, I want to say, described more as a community of countries that come together and they can make decisions. So, if the United States is going to be there to veto any sort of UNSC resolution, they can't do that in the General Assembly.
Okay, wait, I think I can just bridge this. Even if the United States doesn't sign on to an arms embargo to Jerusalem, if other countries do, and United States seems to be one of the only countries that is willing to not sign on to something like that. But these resolutions come from the UN that everyone signs on to. This feels like a completely useless distinction.
And if they're vetoed, then it's no longer a UN, or
That's
it is a UN
I just
thing,
said if the United
UN
States
thing.
doesn't veto it.
Okay, and how realistic is that?
It could change with our
with our hearts and minds, right?
President, probably, but maybe the president.
Right? We're gonna get Bernie Sanders elected, and everything's gonna change. Okay,
No,
it's the average.
I don't think he would be that tough on Israel, unfortunately.
Sorry, I understand what you mean now. The idea of calling a country an apartheid state and anti-democratic, and actively discriminating against people that it has the responsibility to be protecting and stuff, this is the rhetoric that changes the public opinion within a country that values democratic liberties, civil liberties and stuff, that could move the political atmosphere of the United States to abstain from things that it normally vetoes. Does that make sense? I don't think calling a country an apartheid state is not meaningless to me. I think that will carry a lot of public weight. That is a big distinction.
I want to respond to that.
How's that going right now, though?
Yeah, because earlier you mentioned South Africa, the other well-known apartheid state, and yeah, South Africa got a bunch of sanctions on it, etc. Do you actually think that the U.S. will lead a collective united front of grand sanctions against Israel just because the UN posted a report on them? That's not going to happen.
Not lead. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to get the U.S. to lead anything. Someone else in the rest of the entire fucking world can figure out how to lead stuff besides the United States. But the United States can be moved off of its blocking role. I think that's what the goal should be. They can
lead sanctions without the United States in that case, without the UN resolution. They can still do it.
Yeah, you could do unilateral sanctions.
Yeah, and you can find other buddies to do the sanctions with. Go through your own diplomatic channels.
Yeah, and then once you do, then, well, you're going to have to mess with the United States because they're not going to like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. I remember that in the Netherlands, there was some, I don't know what actually happened to it, but I remember there was a push for recognizing Palestine overall. So yeah, it can be done like with the US, but obviously like the more the merrier the better, right? In the sense of what you want to do. That being said, like I want to go to one point that uh, Socrates was bringing up about like moving the embassy. Um, so uh, uh, my question around that would be: would it be useful to move it back to Tel Aviv or something like that, or is that just already like a done deal? So Socrates.
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge amount of the harm has been done, and I don't know how much. Um, right. So if you move your embassy once to Jerusalem, that's a very bold, decisive move. If you move it back, now it just seems like, fuck, USA is a democracy. They go in a new direction every 40 years. It doesn't mean anything. Um, so moving it back, I think would help, but I think so much of the damage has already been done as a result of having done that at all. I don't know what other people think about that.
I mean, it definitely doesn't
I
carry
think
as
it's
much
largely
weight.
symbolic.
But yeah, I think that I think moving back to Tel Aviv still carries some value. I think it's like I think it's been pretty clear for a while that America's destroyed its like ability to be a neutral arbiter in the situation. So I don't think that's ever going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't yeah. You're not going to like restore that role
Okay.
anytime soon, no matter what you do.
Okay, Levin.
Well, I'm a big supporter of a one-state solution. So ultimately, I think Jerusalem should belong to whoever, and the embassy. The question of the embassy is just whatever the capital is. If it's Jerusalem, the embassy should be there. I think it's kind of weird to have this like symbolism, like where the embassies are. Um, yeah. So that's my hot take.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I think there's some real weight behind that. Like if just hypothetically, if like the U.S. recognized Russia's capital being like Kiev or something, like there's a real impact of what we're saying behind that we're recognizing a certain kind of political or geopolitical reality behind that. I'm interested to hear more about your thoughts on one state, but I don't know if we have other questions about that, so we don't have to.
No,
jump
we
to
should
that.
just go to that because it's dumb.
Okay. Don't say it's dumb, Elysium. Don't do that.
Dumb.
Come on, bro. So, but yeah, we can move on to that because that is actually the second topic that we wanted to address.
Perfect.
When it comes to like the whole ordeal, what would be like a good outcome when it comes to this whole thing, complicated stuff, right? And that being said, like, yeah, basically the question is, what would you see as a solution? One state, two states, 10 states, 0 states, how many states? No
10
states.
states. Sorry.
So yeah, so I will give everybody the opportunity to do opening statements on this one, and let's start off with Checha.
Yeah, so the two-state and one-state solution kind of a debate is riddled with each side calling each other unrealistic. The fact of the matter is that both are unrealistic. Any sort of solution to Israel Palestine is unrealistic because it assumes that both sides are actually going to come together, agree on things, and live happily ever after afterwards. With how things are going right now and what each side believes in, I do not believe there's any sort of solution. However, if one person were to threaten me, I had to give a take. I think I would prefer the two-state solution, and the reason why is because I don't trust in the one-state solution to actually be equitable to all groups of people. So like even if Israel were to become a one-state solution and there's one government, it's democratic, there's going to be a majority and there's going to be sides. There's going to be partisanship that is going to lean towards one side over the other. And I think that side is going to be the Jewish side. And so then when it comes to like the one state government kind of like evenly being responsible for the safety and the well-being of everybody. I don't trust that. I don't trust that for the Palestinian people. I don't think the Palestinians themselves trust it. I think that's why historically they've been more so supportive of the two-state solution, because they want to fend for themselves, and they also want self-determination. So I think of those two solutions, the two-state one is the best one.
Okay, fair enough. Let's go to Socrates.
Sure. So, yeah, I totally agree with what Jay Chow said, that so much of one state versus two state is calling each other unrealistic for supporting them and saying, no, mine is the realistic, yours is pie in the sky. I mean, I don't have any like expertise on what it should be. My understanding is that there's more support for a two-state solution. The issue with a one-state solution is you have just this question of citizenship and voting. So if you have one state, the kind of Israeli Jewish population will be concerned that they will get outvoted, that they'll get outpopulated and outvoted, and they won't want to give up that kind of legislative control. And so the consequences would be some kind of degradation of the rights of non-current Israelis, or non-Jews or something like that. And a two-state sidesteps this, so you can have Israel with maybe even similar borders to what it has now, and then a new Palestinian country that is Gaza and the West Bank with some kind of corridor or even like highway connecting them. That's what seems to be kind of common. That's you can have some kind of UN resolution, I think 242 calls for an actual method to give back land, which is that so you can't just uproot all of the settlements, but what you can do is you can swap an amount of land back. So you have like some line, and you have pushing in one direction. I can't really show this with my hands. Pushing in one direction on a line, and you push back in the other direction, and kind of scoop out areas of territory to kind of equalize the actual area of land, even though you have the settlements remaining. So there are possibilities like this. It seems like it's like practically possible. It's just politically difficult.
Okay, and then next up, let's go to Elysium.
Yeah, this like I don't know, era of ethnic countries and stuff all feels like it is like long past now. The idea that Israel can't be expected to be a multicultural country that has civil rights in the long run, I don't think is just not appealing to me. And currently I describe like we have like a 1.5 state solution. We have like a de facto West Bank and Gaza Strip that are occupied and their own like territories, but are occupied by Israel. And Israel's not going to like give that up anytime soon. So the idea that we're going to get two states out of this instead of Israel just perpetually occupying Palestine for the rest of time doesn't feel very plausible. So in lieu of that, I'd rather have a one state solution. And on top of that, there's kind of like a I don't know if we can get into it here, but like we can just axiomatically, I prefer civil dispute versus like military dispute. I think we have a lot of examples of how to perform civil disobedience or protest for civil rights and things like this if you have a unified country or a unified group of civil rights for a people and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, go.
Okay, then name.
Yeah, I understand the sentiment of wanting to like what Elysium described, of wanting to have like a multicultural one-state solution, liberal democracy, blah blah blah, all that. Now the reality is, we're looking at two people who have been murdering each other for pretty soon, nearly a century. There is bad blood on both sides. there is absolutely no trust on either side that the other side will act in good faith for everyone's interests, I think for now a one-state solution is a pipe dream. I don't see how it can happen, because, or if it does happen, it will happen through the abject oppression of the other side, because the other side will not consent to it. Now, that being said, the two-state solution, as we've seen for the past, well, almost 100 years, is a shit show. It's still people killing each other. I don't, but it is the status quo, and status quo is easier than changing things. I want to see like a realistic plan to restore trust between Palestinians and Israelis. If we have that, then sure, we can discuss how to get to a one-state solution. If we don't have that, I don't think it's possible.
Okay,
I'd love to see it though. Sorry.
Let's go to Lebanese.
Yeah, so I mean, my support of the one state solution. I mean, obviously, we're Twitch streamers, okay? We're not gonna solve it right now. But I am more a supporter of the one state solution because I think it's really difficult to have a weak, broken up country and having your enemy basically on your border. And that's not a sustainable way. It's gonna like keep fueling conflict in the area. Of course, I don't think there are some Zionists that believe that Israel should be a one state, and it should just be Israel, and the Palestinians live under Israeli rule. That's not how I see it. I see. Ideally, the situation would be that you have equal representation between the Palestinian side and the Israeli side within one country, whether you want to call it Israel or Palestine or I don't know, something third, that's irrelevant. But just having some kind of like common country with representation from both sides or three sides, depending if you want to include the Christians in that too.
Okay. Two separate countries warring at each other, but if it was one country and it was a civil war, I don't think there's much difference between the two. You get what I'm saying? Because
Yeah,
like
I
if there's
see.
gonna be a one-state solution, but like there's still that strife that Naaman was talking about, and they're still gonna be fighting each other. Yeah, I don't think that's going like the one-state solution is any better when it
Yeah.
comes to like conflict. A prerequisite, I would argue, to a two-state solution would be that there is actually some form of peace and reconciliation. And that's probably the biggest reason why I think it is equally unrealistic for a two-state solution to occur. But it's something that I would prefer much more for the arguments that I made before.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
I totally get. I totally I get your point. My point is not that this is what I want to see happen right now, but this is rather a goal that Palestinians and Israelis and Middle Easterners in general, because this is affecting all of us, right? Should be working towards. That's like the ideal situation, I think.
Okay, Socrates.
Yeah, and I guess I can't argue against that. It's ideal.
Yeah, Socrates.
Yeah. So this question of so first of all, one thing that gets resolved pretty trivially, assuming that the kind of borders and control are really like just defined as two sovereign states. One thing that the two states makes very simple is a question of like building permits. This is currently, in my understanding, a thing that's kind of a big issue right now of Palestinians living in Israel being denied building permits, and I would assume that there'd be a fear that that kind of unequal treatment under the same state would continue. But I think that the big thing, kind of from the Israeli side, is that question of, well, if everybody gets a vote, what if it turns out there's like a lot more like Arab or Muslim or Palestinian people just in this country? Then, you know, do they just like vote out the Jews? I mean, I don't think like current iteration of Israel is going to accept a situation where that's even like a remote possibility.
Do you want to respond to that, Lemon?
Sorry, I totally didn't hear that. I'm so sorry.
Whoa.
That's okay.
My chat.
Well,
was
I'm
fucked up.
sorry. I'm sorry, Socrates, for that. I'm sorry.
It's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
It's okay.
I'm as a guest, on the show. I'm so just being ignored. So anybody else wants to respond to that?
I mean, I think your kind of quasi solution for that is to have a strong civil liberties in your laws. And to take, to change your civil liberties requires typically much more than a majority. And to have like a robust judicial system to then defend those civil liberties for both sides.
Yeah.
But
So,
I mean, yeah.
So I'd be happy to repeat that because I did actually want to hear Lemony's thoughts on that. If
Yeah,
you're,
go for
I
it.
don't know,
No,
if your chat's
I'm listening
got
now.
some cool copy pasta. So the question is like, there's this big issue of just, I feel like Israel, if you could kind of like essentialize the psychology of Israel right now, the idea of expanding who gets treated as a citizen and who gets to vote to include like all Palestinians and maybe even like some kind of right of return, and allowing for population growth, not controlling building permits, then it seems like there'd be this fear that basically Jews could get outvoted by Muslims, and that would feel like kind of the annihilation of Israel itself, if that could happen.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the question of right of return, it's really hard because all the Palestinians that have become refugees after Israel's conception, potentially you could say, they're now making up like 7 million people or something like that. Like you can't have them all come back. It would be extremely unrealistic. But I mean, I don't know. It's like this question of like if a certain population is willing to be the minority or the majority or whatever. Like, I guess I don't care about that,
Well,
But I guess
well, here,
Israel.
But
let me throw it back to you because I feel like Israel does care about it, and I feel like they care about it enough that they won't accept. Oh, maybe we'll get outvoted, and then we won't really have like Israel as we sort of we'll just kind of like kind of give up all control. Really, I don't see that really like happening. Like period. So
No, but
I was wondering if you had
yeah.
things that you'd heard that were kind of ways of getting around that.
I mean, the arguments that I'm like mainly for is because what we're trying to do now is not really working, right? And I know that's not an argument, but trying to create a two-state solution hasn't really been successful. And having your enemy by your border is also like hasn't been the best thing for the region. I'm thinking like the region as a whole. Not just specifically what's happening Israel Palestine, because it has ripple effects throughout the like the Middle East, right? If I have like a path you could take to make Israel/Palestine one country, no. I mean, I can acknowledge that they're both quite unrealistic, right? They're both really, really tough solutions. Again, like Jay Chow said, like, yeah, it's ideals. Like what I personally support and am in favor of to see in the future, it would definitely be the one state solution. But how to get there? If I had that answer, I think I would be a politician somewhere.
Yeah, so there was a question from somebody in chat that basically asked like, if there is like a two-state solution and like Hamas is in power and like in one of those states, would that not would that not raise more concerns for Israel overall? So would that not incite like more conflicts? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I don't know what's so different about that hypothetical and what we're doing, what's happening right now, in which Hamas has a political and military presence in whatever territory that it is in, and there's conflict between Hamas and Israel. So then, like as I said before, for any sort of solution, whether it be one state or two state, to actually occur to the likings of the people on this panel, then a prerequisite to reaching that would be some peace and reconciliation. And that's what makes it, again, I'm going to reiterate, I said this already, and that's what makes it unrealistic. Because what is the likelihood that there is going to be any sort of a good faith peace and reconciliation from either side when they come to the table?
If we're looking at things realistically, there already essentially is a one-state solution because Israel already
It's not a
controls.
solution, you idiot. It's a problem.
Okay.
That's the one-state
Okay, there already is a
problem.
one-state problem. Okay, happy. Israel already controls everything.
I mean, like, you say that it's a solution. It's probably just like a mistake that you said that. I don't know, but like, it's not a solution for one side, and that's
Yeah,
what makes it a problem. That's what makes it that's what gets people killed.
Okay, Elysium, go ahead.
Yeah, no, true. Yeah, we can call it a one-state problem, sure. And as Socrates has pointed out, even if Israel's Zionist dreams are realized, if they don't also coincide with the ethnic pushing out of the Palestinian people, then Israel feels that having a Palestinian majority vote is unacceptable.
Mhm.
And I think given the current situation, the only way that changes is with Israel's takeover of land, that it needs to realize to make a really strong group of civil liberties for its people. And it's probably going to coincide with a lot of ethnic cleansing of people being pushed out. And then in the long run, a civil disobedience push for civil rights that can then normalize relationships in a few generations later. I don't know.
Okay, Socrates?
Yeah, I mean that's. I was just gonna agree with him agreeing with me, and say that it seems like for Israel to accept a one state, they would come with basically things like, well, if you're a citizen, but you're not like quite 100% a citizen. Like you're a Palestinian citizen of Israel, and you're not allowed to build a home unless unless we say that you can, and we want to make sure that there aren't too many Palestinian families, because if we are going to give you votes, we don't want you to have too many total votes, because then we don't have almost all the votes.
I guess I think that would still be better than what we currently have, though, because what we currently have is that one-state solution, essentially one-state problem, but there is no responsibility for the Israeli government to their occupied citizens, essentially. So I think that would still be
ideally,
progress
we
in
should
the right
go through
direction.
ethnic cleansing in order to get to a brighter future.
I mean, we're talking about like going through racism to get to a better future, but yeah.
Where have I heard that one before?
I don't think I could support that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just have the occupied indefinitely for the rest of time.
I think that's a bit out there.
I mean, do you think that what is currently happening is better than that? Just being in an occupied territory.
I don't think ethnic cleansing is a
rights?
necessary evil that we should like take. There are other necessary evils that I agree with, but ethnic cleansing is like, well, it's like, okay, well, you know what? If Nazi Germany just ended up winning the war and the entire world was just Aryan Germans, then maybe we wouldn't have ethnic conflicts. Oh man, damn. Maybe genocide was the answer to our brighter future. Maybe we could have gotten base-based communism a lot sooner. It's like that's I think that's the problem with those kinds of arguments, is that you actually never know when acts of extremism, when acts of accelerationism is actually going to yield results. But what you do know is that there are atrocious acts, and that the immediate consequences.
What you do know is what's happening right now, and those atrocious acts are already happening right now.
Okay,
so you don't get to pick a future that doesn't have ethnic cleansing.
So then the current atrocities do not justify more atrocities. Okay.
I want to stay there.
If you agree, then why did you say it?
Well, because I'm not justifying them. I'm saying what is most probable to happen, and what is the bounds that we can actually play in to find a long-term solution. It's not the same thing as justifying.
Yeah. So then,
them.
like, what is what is the likelihood of the long-term solution? Do you have a magical ball in which you say, hey, if you just do these 10 steps, peace in the world? No, you can't say that.
I am not. But I don't understand how.
But you're proposing a long-term solution. So how can you So how can you propose this long-term solution without being confident that there's actually a solution at the end?
Because the current situation is just as bad, if not worse.
And but you just agree with me that a current situation being bad doesn't justify something even worse that we have to commit.
I'm not sure.
So are
okay.
you now
I'm not
disagreeing
sure
with yourself?
Meaning, I'm not sure
what
what
is
you're meaning
going
by
on?
justify. I'm not. You're not like saying this is ideal or good. You're just saying what is better than the
Elysium,
bad
okay,
thing that
Elysium.
currently
There's a
exists.
trolley
That's what I
cart.
mean by justify.
Elysium, there's a trolley cart, and
Yeah.
100 people have already died. Now, do you want to kill more people just because we're already in a bad situation, or do you want to like kind of think, hey, maybe be a little bit more idealistic? I think right now I would want you to be just a little bit more idealistic than to be like, yeah, fuck it, okay, let's just commit atrocious acts because the ends justify the means.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm so far out of the loop at this point. What's the act that we're talking about committing to try to get things rolling?
Accepting the Zionist
Elysium is like, yeah, let's assess the Zionist Israel. Let's actually allow them to commit the ethnic cleansing that they are all the way to the extreme, to the point where they are adequately a one state, a perfect Jewish state, and then maybe in a couple of generations, maybe like the hearts and minds of Israelis would change and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe we want to be multicultural, you know? Maybe we want to like include other people. It's like, yeah, good fucking shot.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't like that idea.
Even how even if we had our Zionist one state, do you think it would be better for the Palestinians living in occupied lands or worse?
The Palestinians wouldn't exist under a Zionist Israel.
Do you think there's gonna be a genocide? What do you mean?
You just mentioned ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, okay, and okay.
Do you know what that is?
Right. Maybe I should say ethnic displacement. Are you happy?
Holy shit! Like that makes it any better. Okay,
I'm not saying
name it. You got this. Come on, jump in, please. I can't do it. I can't be the only one.
You can't drive a nuance between ethnic displacement and ethnic cleansing. This is something you've seen in like race realist debates.
Which is why I call it ethnic cleansing.
Yes.
And it's only because you are equating that to has to be murdering every single person when you're now agreeing that ethnic cleansing can be just displacing an ethnic minority too, or denying them civil rights and being racist.
So let's just move them out and then be like, okay, awesome. Like, where are they gonna go?
Okay, let's just say instead of calling like ethnic cleansing and displacing, like what we're talking about is state-sanctioned violence against minorities. That's what we're actually talking about.
There are atrocities under the Rome Statute in which you get prosecuted at the International Criminal Court.
And if you're not part of the International Criminal Court, you don't really care about that, do you?
So
I'm saying is the current situation is way worse.
No, I wanna let Naaman to respond to this, and I'll just breathe in, breathe out, guys.
Breathe in, breathe
Everybody, relax a little bit.
No, man. The Jews back in 1930s Germany should have been like, you know what? The situation is really bad. Hitler might as well just push the lever, okay?
You gotta breathe.
Press the button.
So yeah, I'm gonna give it to a name, and then I will give it after that. It's Lebanese, and then you guys can return with Elysium and Chow to the blood sports that you guys are used to. So
yeah.
So let's go to name and then Lebanese. No interruptions.
Mine's the blood sports. I do tend to agree with like Chow here, or maybe I've misunderstood your point, Elysium. But if I've understood correctly, I agree with Chow here. I don't know. The only thing I want to say actually is a stupid meme. Speaking of like how the Jewish people should have reacted during World War II, I find it hilarious that a member of Netanyahu's party was talking about deporting like immigrant workers in trains to camps before deporting them. Sorry, that's my contribution to that.
Okay,
it's not a contribution.
No. Lemon, go ahead.
I feel like I started something horrible here.
Yeah, that's why I asked you. No, just kidding.
Okay, I think what do I think? Meditate. I can see both points, okay? Let's chill. What I don't know what else I can add other than what I said. I mean, I can see Chao's point that it's really unrealistic, but I mean, my point is not based on. Basically, my point is it's something we as Middle Easterners should strive towards, having a peaceful, a calm, a based, a chill, hummus-filled Palestine/Israel that is one state. That's it. How to get there is a whole different issue, but how to get to a two-state solution with Jerusalem being like part of neither is also like, how do you even get there also? Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't be advocating for apartheid nor ethnic cleansing in order
No,
to
me
ask
neither.
like as steps to those
Me neither.
solutions. So then, like, okay, well, Lebanese, when it comes to your support for a one-state solution, if it can only occur by accelerating ethnic cleansing, would you still support it?
No.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I think we can. I think it might be good to do like ending or closing statements on this one, and then we still got one more topic as well. So I think it might be interesting to do that. So endings or closing statements means no interruptions, so everybody can say their piece on this one, and we're gonna move on to the next topic, which is also about Israel. So let's start off with name.
Okay. My stance hasn't really budged much. In an ideal, perfect world where the human beings on both sides could like move past all the years and years of violence, one state solution would be better. I'm usually for people gathering together in bigger and bigger groups and working together and treating each other well, and et cetera, et cetera. In this specific case, it's incremental progress is the name of the game. There need to be small shows of good faith, small demonstrations that de-escalation is possible. Not even peace, just de-escalation. Less attacks from the Palestinian Hamas side. Maybe less retaliation from Israel, or like less oppressive acts from Israel. And it has to start somewhere. And if you tell Israelis that it has to start from them, they'll remind you that they're under attack from that there's an existential threat to their lives and to their country. If you tell that to Palestinians, they'll tell you the same thing, that they're under attack, that there's an existential threat to their people and to their country. And like several times in history, both sides have perhaps done the first step, and if the other party doesn't follow through with their own step, then it all breaks apart, and then there's even more bad blood. So I don't know. I think Chao's description is astute. A one-state solution isn't realistic at the moment, and a two-state solution isn't functional. But it's kind of what's happening right now, and we see it, and it's a shit show. That's what I have to say.
Then let's go to Elysium.
Okay. Okay, I guess. Okay, how do we summarize? I don't see any successful two-state solution coming out because neither side wants peace right now. I feel like I've tried to read that a few times. I think Israel has a bunch more agency than the Palestinians right now, but they obviously don't want peace, and they want to continue their Zionist project, and the current security costs are worth it. If we could normalize relationships with Iran and then apply more pressure on them through other means and stuff, getting a wonderful world, or if to name it, if everyone just wants to be nice and let bygones be bygones and be peaceful now, that'd be super great too. I don't see any of these things happening. I would put more onus on Israel because they have more agency over the situation, but living in a one-state problem is bad. Living under permanent occupation is bad. Living under the current apartheid and ethnic cleansing is bad. So the idea that to find a way forward, I think it would be better for these people who are currently living under these things to live under the same conditions, but under a government that has more responsibility to their civil rights. Which I also think is probably the most realistic outcome, because that's what Israel wants to do, and Israel has the agency and wherewithal to do it right now.
Okay, and then next up, Lemon.
Yeah, mostly agree with Name and with Elysium. There are ideals and things you want to strive towards, and then there's like what's realistic. And they're both interesting conversations to have. There's merit in both of them. There you go, political answer.
Yeah, are you doing the both sides?
Yeah. I just want us to be
Okay.
friends.
Okay. And then Jay Chow.
Okay, I'll do the same thing. Ideally, if I were God and I could control everybody, all governments, all people,
Give it to the
then
Jews. The God
okay,
ones. All right.
yeah,
damn.
to God's people, which is
Hmm.
all people, and including aliens. Gay space communism. Okay, peace and love. No wars, nothing. Okay, yeah. So ideally, that would be the best thing, right? But then, when it comes to what is realistic, neither of these, one state nor two state, is realistic. And any sort of person who is like making arguments for one over the other, I think, myself included, even, is I don't think you guys know what you're talking about. Especially somebody here who believes that, maybe in a couple hundred years, then things are actually gonna go swell if we stick to one direction. It's like, yeah, damn, I'm gonna be dead in a couple hundred years. And even if that were to occur, then like, oh, well, Palestinians, I would want Palestinians to live under a government that has more responsibilities. Well, guess what? At that point, Palestinian people just won't exist because of the previous policies of accelerationist ethnic cleansing. And that is like, if that is your path to a one-state solution, it's not. It's just a one-state problem, but like there are just no more problems because the problem, quote unquote, has disappeared. They have been cleansed.
Okay. And then Socrates.
Sure. So I would say that if there's anybody out there who's watching who has a question of whether there would be a difference between a one-state solution or a two-state solution in which Palestinians have some level of sovereignty, Palestinians currently do not have. So 5 million Palestinians living in West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza aren't able to vote in Israeli elections despite being controlled. They aren't allowed to build. Current president of Israel, as of 2021, said that Israel was becoming an apartheid state. Ehud Barak, Israel's former prime minister, said that Israel is becoming an apartheid state. But B'Tselem, the main human rights organization in Israel, has declared Israel an apartheid state. Desmond Tutu, who was one of the prominent figures in leading South Africa out of apartheid, said that he feels a lot of parallels to being in apartheid South Africa. And the settlements that are built on occupied territories have been declared across the world to be illegal, including an Israeli foreign minister, legal counsel, said that the settlements are illegal. We shouldn't do that. People aren't going to like it because it's illegal. So there really isn't disagreement on whether the settlements are legal. The occupation of the land is illegal. I don't like the sentiment that anything changing is unreasonable. I think it's just a question of whether the political will exists in Israel, in Palestine, in the United States, in Europe, in the Middle East, to push for what has to happen under international law, which is for Israel to stop building settlements on occupied land and to stop occupying land that was taken during war. Those are illegal, and it just has to give those back. It's just a question of whether the international and national will can be brought to bear to make that happen. And I think there is a rising. So in the United States, I believe that there is a rising will for the rights of Palestinians to be recognized. And I think that that's paramount over whether it's a one state or two state. But either way, international law has to be upheld, and Palestinians have to have rights.
Okay. Yeah. Then our next topic is still about Israel. But that being said, like if you are watching the stream, it would be much appreciated if you give one of these people a follow or something more. So we got Elysium, that's the anime character. We got a J Chow
YouTuber.
Live. We got a J Chow Live, which is next to the anime character VTuber. Then underneath me, we got Lebanese 666. And next to Lebanese, we got Neymanen. And next to Neymanen, we got Socrates TV. So
I want to go on
please-
record saying I don't support racism toward VTubers. So
so inclusive. So look at this. So our next topic goes as follow: special trips that are fully funded by organizations to push ideology slash ID, or is basically an ad campaign for something, are usually frowned upon. What do we think about Jewish birthright? So I want to give it up to Socrates. You can start off.
Sure. Yeah, I was just chatting yesterday with my tour guide, one of my tour guides for my birthright tour. What I think about the program overall, I think it's both a propaganda tool and also a tool to increase the population of Israel. The one of the major functions of the birthright tours is that people come from the U.S. and Europe and hang out with young Israeli soldiers and hopefully fall in love and get married and move to Israel. This does happen. I guess that's fine. The propaganda is not good. I was on a food tour, so there was a little bit less kind of overt propaganda. For me personally, coming in already having formed an opinion on Israel, it was very useful for me to see, like personally, what things were like on the ground, to see the wall, to see what things looked like. I saw Gaza through a chain link fence. It was actually very, very close. It was a border settlement that the tour guide's brother was at, where they don't usually go there. And they said that there's like air raid alarms that go off, and sometimes you have a few minutes before like the bombs fall, or sometimes you have like not that long. And they said in this area, sometimes the air raid alarm doesn't go off until after the bombs have started landing. So it was a scary place to be, scary place to see all of the bomb shelters everywhere. It gives you some understanding of what it's like for Israelis to live there, and to try to understand that psychology a little bit more. So I personally didn't feel like I was super swayed by being there, that, it's just like nice food and some of the people are nice and therefore I support the government. But I know that a lot of people are. So I guess that's my both sides.
Okay. And then next, Lebanese.
Oh, and the hummus sucked.
And what sucked?
The hummus.
What?
The best hummus I had was on the flight over. I'm serious.
Oh.
It was.
They took you to the wrong
I don't know.
places, I think. No.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I had really good Arab food there, but
this sounds. These steaks are too hot.
Yeah, that sounds anti-Semitic. That's.
Not gonna lie, airplane food is actually pretty good. I don't know why I get so much hate. Chinchilla, can you host the airplane food panel one day? That'd be pretty good.
It really depends on the flight. The how you call it?
Oh man, the worst. Sorry. This is such a tangent. I'm so sorry. I have ADHD.
This goes off your opening statement time, by the way. So.
True. No, I mean I don't know much about Birthright other than what I've been told by other people that have been on it. Yeah, that's my impression as well. What Socrates just mentioned, that it's kind of like a sort of like a propaganda tool and a way to have people move over there. But I also think people just see it as a free trip. Well, at least the Jewish people that I've talked to, they see it as like a fun free trip or whatever. Whether or not I think it is good, I just don't know like what the impacts of it is. If you see Israel as an occupying country, then it is argued that it's definitely not a good thing because you're trying to move people over into occupied lands. But if you see Israel as just another country, I mean, then it's kind of like irrelevant what birthright is for and what the process and idea is. That's my take.
Okay, Elysium.
I don't know how it's possible to not see Israel as an occupying country. And they've been they're like they have occupied lands, or they're occupying Palestine. That's like the heart of the problem. I don't like the right of return and trips feels like a really cringe policy from like a more cringe time period following World War II, where it made more sense then. I think that's where it was like majoritarily impactful too. I think now it's like our example of like positive ethnic displacement, like they're trying to bring more Jews in to bolster their population. And so like in that regard, it's just like a really cringe immigration policy that can be done in a bunch of other ways. But yeah, so like it's just preferential immigration treatment, and I don't know, it becomes much harder to tackle like a policy level if we want to call it like a racist policy or not, or just like ethnic, or just it doesn't have to be strictly ethnic, or just like country quota immigration style things. You could achieve the same ends.
Okay, then next up, Jay Chow.
I don't have a lot of heavy feelings or thoughts about the birthright trip that Jewish people are able to take, free trip to Israel, I guess tourism. I agree with the description that it's a propaganda tool. And I don't know if this has been mentioned yet, but it's one of the ways that the Israeli government is trying to get its target youth to support the state of Israel, and along with that, support the state of Israel in spite of the atrocities that they commit to other territories and to other groups of people. Their goal is to preserve that sort of sentiment, that the longevity of the Israeli state. And if that is their goal, then I think what they're doing is it would be a good policy. Morally speaking, though, it's I think like there are probably bigger problems to condemn Israel for rather than birthright. But birthright is part of the problem.
Okay. And then Naaman.
I don't think birthright is that much of an issue, because like if we're talking about indoctrination, we still are talking, of course, adults can be susceptible to indoctrination. We've seen a lot of that in recent years. We're talking about adults going on those trips. We're not talking about kids like in schools getting taken to military camps, being told that Arab people want to kill them, which is something that happens also in Israel and is a much bigger issue if we're going to talk about like really loaded propaganda. However, birthright, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm biased. I haven't done my birthright trip yet, but I'm technically entitled to one, and I really want to do it. I want to get a free trip to Israel.
You should do it before you age out.
Yeah, definitely. Wait, what's the age limit? I might be too old already.
I think it was like... so I think it's like 26, but I think they have...
Oh yeah, I'm too old already. Well, okay, so. that ship has sailed.
I think
it's 32.
Yeah.
Oh.
No,
he's just saying that because that's my age.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so much for that. I don't know. I like at the end of the day, countries want people to come to them and to live there. It brings wealth to the country, whether material wealth or intellectual wealth. Those people will add to the value of a country. That's not a weird thing. The propaganda, sure. It's a bit cringe, but it's really not the worst part. If we're going to talk about propaganda, I think there are other things that that happen in Israel that are much worse and that actually matter.
Okay. Yeah, that being said, like we got somebody over here that had done that trip, right, Socrates? So I want to ask I want to ask you then a question about this because of the fact that you said like I wasn't influenced by the trip whatsoever, but that's because I have like prior knowledge about like the whole the problems over there, right? Would you say that if you didn't know that you could have been influenced a lot more?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't say that I wasn't influenced at all, but I would say that I already had decided that the Israel was like illegally occupying land and all this stuff. I wasn't just kind of going in. I don't know. I guess more kind of naive about it. But yeah, I would say for sure that if you really just didn't know that much or weren't that interested in kind of what was going on geopolitically, and you were just like whatever Brooklyn Jew coming to Israel for a free trip, and you were just, oh, I'm spending this time with these people, and they're being nice to me, and I'm having sometimes good food, then you would, and maybe you're seeing like, oh, here's this like connection to this like spiritual thing. I mean, it was pretty crazy to see like the tomb of King David, seeing like the Western Wall. Up on like the Golan Heights, there was like this mountain that's like mentioned in the Bible. There's a lot of kind of cool spiritual stuff. So I could see very easily somebody coming into that and just being like, oh, these people are my bros. They're cool. Why are you talking trash about Israel? Those people were really cool to me, right? That's like I feel like that's the base level, like normal human response to that kind of thing. Somebody who isn't a weird, Twitch debate, fucking whatever, politics person, right? That's what I am. Isn't normal, right? I think most normal people will probably go in there and they'll be positively influenced, which is why they're doing it, of course. So I don't think that they shouldn't be allowed to do it. But I think the overall effect is that people get more sympathetic to Israel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That being said, like, name, now you know that you're too old to have the trip.
Actually, I just double checked. It is 32. I can still fly.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Maybe you can just go this year or something. I don't know. But,
Yeah, I got to do it really fucking fast though.
Okay.
If you're seriously interested, I can talk to somebody.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll hit you up in DMs maybe. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Free trip. So yeah, I was too soon to talk, but are you like, given what Socrates said, right? Do you feel like different, or do you still feel the same about that? Name.
Who, me?
Yeah.
It is really interesting to hear it, to hear like his perspective. My brother also did it, and it was really interesting to hear his perspective. And he did like share a lot of concerns as well about the indoctrination part of it. He was like, yeah, you gotta like sit in a room and they're like talking to you for 2 hours about how great Israel is, and that maybe your experience was a bit different. I imagine there's like different programs, and it was like a long time ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of different tours.
Yeah. But so like his experience was like he had to sit in a room and kind of like the scam selling type thing where someone's like talking at you for 2 hours.
Buy timeshare in Israel.
Yeah, exactly. And but then like once you're done with it, and you're like on basically a guided vacation. And he thought it was really interesting to visit, for example, the kibbutz, see the different lifestyles of different communities in the country and all that stuff. And of course, yeah, like that's shown because it gives a positive image of Israel. But like, just because Israel does do fucked up things doesn't mean that there aren't positive things in Israel either. Like they aren't showing false things. There are normal people living there who are living normal lives, who aren't hunting Palestinians for sport, and that's a reality too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's further east.
Yeah.
Jeez.
We didn't go that far east.
Do you want to respond to that?
No, I don't think it's a very big problem, but I don't think it's like a necessary like good thing either. Like it is like a really cringe policy in and of itself. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it's a privately funded, primarily. Like I'm not even sure actually how much like Israel as a state puts into it. I think it's largely like American philanthropists.
I didn't know it was private.
Can I?
Yeah, I think
can
it is,
I-
or
oh, sorry.
it's like a collaboration with the government. I guess they do a lot of connections with it, but I think the
Like,
money is
okay,
mostly
if
private.
America comes out and be like,
One
you know,
quarter.
we want to have a special immigration status for British people because we were originally a British colony, and so like you get preferential immigration treatment. It'd be like, okay, that's kind of weird and cringe, and wouldn't be something I'd support, but like it wouldn't be the end of the world. It's kind of how I view it.
Can I ask you something? I want to debate you a bit, Elysium, but I'm not going to be mean. But like, how can you? What's the difference for you? How can you argue that the birth rate program is cringe? But I know personally that you are like rather pro-immigration. You're rather liberal when it comes to immigration. What's the difference between a program that actively encourages immigration and settlement into the country? Or just having like passively more open borders? What makes it cringe in your
because you're targeting a specific ethnicity with the immigrations. Like that'd be like why it would be cringe because in the American example, it'd be like we want specifically to give preferential treatment to British people. We'd be like, okay, why? That's what makes it cringe. Not the idea of immigrants. That's fine. It's good for your economy and good for your country. It's making it preferential to a certain ethnicity or group of people or like religion or heritage thing.
Okay, so that's a really fair point. But I do want to nuance it a bit because we
Go for it.
Like there is a history to it. The reason why it's targeted to people with ties to Jewish ethnicities is because it's tied to the history of it being supposed to be like a refugee state post World War II. So, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because we do have fast tracks for people with different kinds of refugee statuses. Now, they don't last for 80 years, but like right now, Ukrainians who go into Poland, they get Polish like integration to the Polish social security, and all their paperwork goes through. It's all fast tracked, super. It's instant. Yep. They're treated differently than other ethnicities when it comes to integration into the system, and the U.S. does that too. Britain did that for Hong Kong when China decided to break the pact with it, etc., etc. So there is precedent for this.
Sure. Well, no, there's precedence for refugees. I just don't think it applies anymore, which is why, like, originally, I understand it become out, so it came from like a more cringe time period, being post World War II, makes a lot more sense then. But I don't think the idea of it still qualifying as like a refugee policy makes sense anymore. I think it should have ended. Like that part is where it's transitioned to being cringe now. I don't know like a definite year of where it becomes like refugee to cringe, but I think we can draw a line in general and say by now you're not importing refugees from Europe and post a war against Jews anymore, right?
So that's I actually agree with that. Like that's 100% fair. Though in practice, from what I've heard, and maybe Socrates, you like know something about this or not. What I've heard is that they've become extremely like really liberal about who gets to claim birthright status. As much as early on it was very selective, or not very selective, but at least it was selective. What I've heard is that they've become they'll accept you even if you can like find something far away in your family tree that like some vague connection. So it's no longer, basically why I'm bringing this up is because it's no longer this like strict ethnic thing. It's more like in principle we have to like have you find something so we can like at least kind of pretend you're of Jewish origin, but we don't actually care about that. That's my impression.
Also, what's interesting is it seems like they also accept converts, like converts to Judaism now as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, so me and my friend were gonna try to coach my non-Jewish friend to get on to get on the tour. Try to coach him to the questions. So so when you like sign up to try to like apply for it, they do like a phone interview, and they ask you like a lot of stuff, and then at the airport, El Al, like the Israeli like airline, they have people there that like they kind of like interrogate you about being Jewish,
Wow.
which I found out I really enjoy having like a little Israeli woman like grilling me about stuff being interrogated. I realized that's a king for me, I guess. But they were like really like it was really intense. It was like, oh, you know, what kind of food did your family cook for this holiday? Or, you know, how like what did you do on this day? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. We probably went to temple. It's like, and then what did you do? It's like, oh, I don't know. We went home. What did we eat? I don't know. Fuck. It's like I feel like I'm not nailing this. It was pretty intense. But yeah, I mean, they're I think they really like want people who feel connected to Judaism to come there. So it's like it's how do I say this? It's not that like you have to be like super Jewy for them to want you, but they want you to come because of Judaism. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like they want that to be your connection to it.
Even if the like background stuff was all in name only and it got super relaxed, just the idea of that like being on top of your immigration policy is like weird on a weird level. It's not you're not just accepting immigrants anymore. You're saying like we want this country's demographics to be skewed towards X thing, even if it's only a name only. You're setting like a cringe element to it.
Yeah, I would say it goes beyond cringe.
Elysium, it just sounds to me that you don't like Israel being a Jewish state.
I don't. Yeah, I'm not an ethno-statist. That's super weird.
Yeah, and so going even further. So if you're not like, I think like a certain type of like Orthodox Jewish, you're not allowed to get married legally within Israel. It's like you have to. So the marriages. So like I know in the U.S. we kind of dealt with this a little bit when we were thinking about like gay marriage, and they were like, oh, okay, we have like civil unions. Like, how does this work? Is this like a church or a state thing? But marriages in Israel are like religiously based. Like at the state level, they're religiously based. It's not like you get a certificate and then you go see a rabbi later and you do like a ceremony. That the ceremony is like the religious thing is like the legal thing. Those are tied together in Israel.
Okay. I want to say just like the reason I brought up the like kind of opening up the restrictions on who can claim to have birthright. Like I personally agree. I think states should be not atheist but lay. There should be separation of religion and state. And I'm not a fan of ethno states and all that stuff. Just wanted to make sure it's bad, but it's not as bad as it might look without bringing that nuance. It's a little bit better. It's still bad. That just want to make sure. Like I don't want to sound like I'm supporting this like weird ethnic movement type of immigration.
You sound exactly like that.
Thank you. Also, one thing I want to say, Socrates. So basically, you like arrive at the airport in like Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or whatever, and the cop's like, "You say you're Jewish? Name 3 Jewish people." Is that what
no?
It was like?
No. So this is before you get there. So this was like I was flying through like New York.
Okay.
So like at the airport in New York before you get like on the plane or anything like that. No, they're like grilling you in there. So they're not looking to see if you're like Jewish enough, if you eat enough like traditional foods. I think it's more like they're looking to see if you're like lying about stuff. I think it's more of like a security thing really than I don't know. It's it's more
I
to look for
see.
like discrepancies and
My advanced
I-
intelligence can be used
like
like an
before this
octopus to
podcast,
suffocate
I watched
and pull
something on
apart my
YouTube, and
enemy's
there was one
arguments.
dude who got basically
Yo, thanks
sent
for the
back
follow,
home
Cooper.
because of the
Appreciate
fact
it.
that they found out that he wanted to join the trip to bang Israeli woman. So
that's
that
the whole,
he was
the
like
whole
pretty
point.
vocal about that, and that was not
Oh,
accepted. So yeah,
But that would
Will
increase
they
their
actually
it's
population
cringe to
around
say
it?
it, but that's the point.
well, I don't think it's like was in line with the religious values, right? Like it's a little bit like he just wanted to bang them. He doesn't want to breed. So, but
Yeah.
I just have an issue with this, like overall, because if I can imagine, like let's say like Lebanese is like starting some sort of foundation in the same kind of way to get people to Iraq or something, and with like Jewish background and that kind, or Jews with Muslim background, I think that would be banned in Denmark. I cannot see that happen. For Jewish people, it seems to be, but if it's Arab and Muslim related, I think that would be banned. But yeah, I don't know how
Wait,
you feel.
if it would be banned in Denmark, if Iraq said, "Hey, free trip, come visit your home country."
Yeah, with the ties that it's like it has like Muslim like you got to prove that you're Muslim, and it's like to promote Muslim culture or something along those lines.
I don't I don't know. I can't say what Denmark would do, but I don't think that sounds that bad. I mean, it sounds a little trivial, maybe. I think it sounds like every country should do that. Every single country should have birthright. Okay, it sounds like a cool, fun trip. You go there, it's paid for, it's free. Everyone should be able to experience that. I'm jealous. Okay, I'm jealous.
Okay, name.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I'm like 99.999% sure that there are Muslim organizations that will help Muslims do their trip to the Mecca, which is like a very similar thing. It's like a big part of the culture. It's you have to do it in your lifetime if you're a Muslim, and it's like a trip. It doesn't have the idea of settling there, but you're still traveling like back into the Arab world to immerse yourself into the culture and do like a religious thing. So, and that's completely tolerated. I haven't heard anyone except like weirdo far right people complain about that.
Oh.
Yeah. And I can say even so, I've been pretty harsh on birthright and just a lot of this stuff, but I can say that, you know, a lot of the people who are working to like fund and organize this stuff really just at a authentic like religious level believe that you know, Jews should be able to come and like see the Holy Land. That's like what birthright means, whatever. I think I think the religion is cringe. But there's a lot of people who like authentically believe that it's not just as kind of a propaganda tool. It is, a lot of it is really heartfelt.
Okay. So yeah, I think that wraps it up, like pretty much. Unless if somebody still wants to, Lisa, you still want to say something on this?
I mean, I would say I think it'd be much better if you want to add like qualifications to your immigration policies about like language or culture or something. That seems fine, or in like a very broad sense. But like to yeah, once you get it down to like ethnicities or religious stuff, it seems like super weird. I feel like
I don't know how culture is any more like better or different than
Okay, yeah,
what
culture is a bad word.
people
You're
like.
right.
Even language.
Values or language makes perfect sense.
What?
Yeah.
How does that make sense? But like culture, ethnicity, race? How? What?
Well, because
Wait.
language is going to be universally used in your country, right?
Wait, doesn't Spain, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Spain sort of do something like that where they accept it's easier to get citizenship in Spain if you are from a Spanish speaking country. Isn't that, I feel like I've read something like that. Maybe it was a TikTok I saw.
Hey, okay, if the Elysium wants Israel to be like this multicultural liberal haven, then I don't know why he would be okay with, hey, you know what? Language barrier? Fine by me. That makes no sense to me.
Elysium?
How are
I
you
don't, because
okay?
these things
Like as
exist
a, like
in the world.
how
What do you mean? I don't understand.
wait,
I can't go in
yeah.
the world and change what languages people speak. But you can say that a criteria based on what like ethnicity you're born in is cringe, but a criteria based on what languages you know how to speak is not cringe. I don't understand how this is a problem.
Yeah, and what's also realistic in the world is that people have different cultures and people have different ethnicities, and yet you think that differentiating immigration based on those qualities are cringe, but not language? You have
Yeah.
yet to prove to me why those two are different.
Okay, anyone can learn a language. I cannot change what ethnicity I was born as. Language is also going to be used
Elysium,
in your
please
communication.
learn.
Let me finish.
Please learn Russian by tomorrow. Okay, you could do it. You could learn it. You got this.
You could. Someone could if they want to live in Russia. And it's not even like a requirement for most stuff. Just showing that you like want to learn the language or you have some knowledge of the language gives you preferential treatment in immigration.
So how can Israel?
based
So
on
how
stuff.
can Israel become a multicultural haven if like the requirement to be there in the first place is to speak? I don't know what they speak. It's like Judea.
You can get on pretty well with just English. Honestly, most places.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because that's how the world is trained. Because English is based. But like anyone, any ethnicity can have any culture, right? You can have any ethnic background and be a member of a certain type of culture. These aren't exclusive, right? But you can't be a member of any ethnicity if you weren't born as that, right? I mean, this is the difference. Something being like malleable versus being inalienable. So making I can't even speak. Whatever. Making a restriction that you can't change is cringe.
Okay, name?
Yeah, I also just want to add, it really is just practically so much easier to function in a country if you speak the language. Like if you go for a residency permit in any country and you're like, yeah, I'm already like semi-fluent in the language, they'll be like, oh great, so you can work here already. You'll be able to, you won't be lost navigating the administration, like filing paperwork, etc. You're actually going to be a functional citizen, like right off the bat. It's
and
kind of normal to
what's
discriminate
also
on that.
like really functional to the Jewish state is for people to be Jewish, right? So then maybe the ethnicity part on the practicality part isn't that so cringe, but Elysium is. Like, hey, I'm trying to pinpoint down an inconsistency from Elysium because it's
This
pissing
is
me
an
off.
inconsistency.
Yes, it is.
Like the language and culture are different. Like language and culture, language and ethnicity, those are disconnected.
You realize that like language is a part of a culture, yeah?
I mean,
Sure.
it can be,
What
but
do
everyone
you
is
mean it can
gravitating
be?
towards English, right? Right now, English is a pretty
No, everybody's
Western
gravitating towards
language.
Chinese.
Okay.
Outside
English
of
is a
Okay,
pretty
and like this
Western
is, but like
language.
this
Yeah?
isn't about like, oh, is English the thing that everybody should be jumping
I'm not.
on?
I tried to make an
I'm
example. Never mind.
I'm just hammering you on like you think X, Y, and Z is cringe. Something
Yeah.
else is not cringe, but yet like you still haven't the differences that you said don't make any sense to me. Those are
Okay.
not good
How do you not
differences.
understand the difference? I can change what languages I speak. I cannot change what I was born as. Yes? Do you understand that concept?
Okay, so then like, okay, yes, the concept
That is the concept.
what okay, no, shut up. What the concept is what is immutable and what isn't immutable, right?
Yes.
But just because something isn't immutable doesn't mean that you could put a requirement on it.
You guys want to move on?
No, I don't.
No,
I mean,
you don't.
yes, you
That's a
can
bad
make, you
argument.
can make mutable requirements that are still cringe, Chow. I agree with that. I'm just saying, if you're gonna make one
So
that's
why
based off your
why are you
ethnicity-
still saying that language isn't cringe if that's the case?
Because I don't think that's one of them.
And why isn't it one of them?
Because you have to be able to communicate with other people in the place you go, and that takes time. And so a country is saying, hey, you have no connections here, and you have no way to communicate with people here. How are you going to function in our society? Is a reasonable criteria to ask someone.
Okay, we're gonna move on. That being said, we can all agree that French as a language is cringe.
True.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Very true.
Just kidding. I'm just poking fun at it.
Putain,
But
sacre bleu.
so yeah, that being said, like we have been going for a while now. We still are going to continue on with our next panel. That being said, that's going to be in like 45 minutes. So I don't know. I don't know what I got to do in the meantime. So I'll just like go like here, do another shit.
Dance.
Yeah, is that
Dance.
that's how you get the subs, right? No, but
Karaoke stream. Sorry.
stream. That being said, like I really appreciate that everybody came on today, and was good fun, and I appreciate our guests for coming. So Lebanese and Socrates TV, I appreciate that you guys were able to come on. Please give them a follow or whatever, and of course we got our whatever else. Maybe follow you on Instagram. Maybe you can do that.
True.
So that being said, like also we got our panelists at JJ Live, Elysium, and Neymannen. Give them a follow as well. I really appreciate that everybody came on. So that being said, like I'm probably going to wrap it up here. I don't know. Should I just continue on streaming? Wanna hang out name? Something.
Oh no. Sure. Yeah. Let's hang out. Okay. We need a topic then.
What's the topic?
Fuck. Right. I'm look. You find it. I'm still shouting out people in my chat. Okay.
Okay.
I'm doing work here.
All right, I'm now gonna shout out people in my chat, but I'm also gonna hop off. So you guys enjoy your body modification panel. That's happening soon, right?
Yeah.
Like 50 minutes.
So, 50 minutes, something like that. Yeah. So,
Enjoy.
ciao. Appreciate it.
Right,
Bye-bye.
thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah, no problem. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for hosting. It was good to chat with everybody. This is the most, despite some of the yelling, this is the most like reasonable panel on Israel I've ever been a part of. So
yeah, that's the thing, right? Like imagine not people yell on this topic. That's like I think we still had like a reasonable talk, considering that like it's just one of these topics, and Elysium, stop doing that. No, it's one of these topics that is just it's so controversial, and also like somebody earlier in my chat, he said like there's not like really good reporting on it, and I would actually agree with that. Normally I would say like, well, come on, you can find good reporting, but usually the reporting is just full on one side or full on another side, and it's not productive.
Yep. Guys, I really have to pee, but thank you for it was great meeting you, talking to you, re-talking to you, re-meeting you. See you soon for body mod discussion. And I'll see you on the other side.
All right, see you.
See you in a bit.
All right, bye.
take care.
Neymannen.
Yeah.
Chinchilla doesn't think having 4 arms is body modding. He thinks it's transhumanism. I think he's wrong.
Wait, no, transhumanism is body modification. What the fuck? It is both.
Oh, you guys are
There's
both
a line. There's a line.
Yeah, there's a huge line. Okay.
Like getting your ear pierced is a body mod, but I don't think that that's
transhumanism.
Transhumanism. 4 arms, maybe.
I guess.
Or have you seen people?
Well, you guys
put
have
like
to
a magnet.
You guys are just wrong.
And they can do
But
electric fields.
even like the cultural origin of body modification, when it's used in religious or symbolic purposes, the goal is to somehow transcend your human condition. You're putting symbols of your deities. You're invoking powers beyond you in order to transcend your human condition. Now, sure, it's become an aesthetic thing in modern times. It's completely gone past that. But even there, like even as an aesthetic, like if we look at the symbolism for many people, tattoos have been a symbol also of memory of their lives. They're carrying their lives on their skin, and
Okay. This is. Do you think that's how? This is like a historical transhumanism or something. I don't know. I guess I never would use transhumanism in a modern sense like that.
I'm also like a very
it.
semantic person. Okay, like you put the words body and modification next to them. I expect that all modification of your body is gonna fit under body modification. Like that's also where I'm coming from, to be honest.
Okay, cool. I'm just saying, forearms is body modding, not transhumanism in my book.
Yeah, but what about foreheads? Got him.
Well,
fucking got
true.
him. We lost Chinchilla.
You lost Chinchilla. You're all alone now.
Yeah.
Get back.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go play some Dota with my chat.
Oh shit! What do you play?
I play mostly off lane, but I want to try some Phantom Assassin actually today because I watched a BSJ guide, and now I'm pumped to see if I can make it work.
Nice. Gotta get those last hits.
Yeah, man. Ooh, I'm gonna have to practice some last hit trainer first because.
Yeah.
No, I've been playing a lot of like Necrophos, like Bristleback. I've had pretty good luck with, like in the off lane. Anything that you can just like really bully their safe laner with.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as someone who's played a lot of like either support or carry, I fucking hate Bristleback players. Okay.
Hell yeah.
I will support state violence against Bristleback players.
Gulag for the Bristleback.
Yes. Gulag for the Bristleback.
Gulag for the goo.
Okay, have fun.
All right, take care.
See ya.